The struggle is its lack of clarity. A lot of people ascribe success in life by their activity. We turn on social media and we see activity all the time, when in reality, it is identity.
Is this something that would help people who are doing the activity is good, but the direction may not be aligned with their purpose?
I'm so busy. I can't do this. What does that mean? Are you moving forward? You can say an activity is a dog chasing its tail, but if you are directional and effective, that's very different.
The people that typically successful, in their minds, if they're successful, why are they reaching out to you?
There's a difference between being happy and having joy. Many people are happy, but they don't have.
Most people aren't stuck because they're lazy. They're stuck because they're building a life around the wrong version of themselves. In this episode, I sit down with Randall Thames, leadership advisor and creator of the Discover, Develop, Display framework, to talk about purpose, discipline, and the moment you realize success still feels empty when it's not aligned. This is for anyone doing all the right things, but quietly wondering why it still doesn't feel right. How are you doing today?
Raina, I am fantastic. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate that you're giving us this space to have this very important conversation.
Yeah, I'm really anxious about this space and this conversation as well, Randall. And in preparation, considering the work that you do, the preparation that I had for this is I took some notes from Psychology Today. They did an article, and they're talking about people who struggle finding their purpose in life. And I was actually really surprised to find out that roughly 25% to 30% of people explicitly report having no clear life purpose. Up to 91% experience a stressful struggle to define it. So you built your work around helping people discover, develop, and display their inner best. But I wanted to start with that huge number that I think in a lot of ways surprised me, that there are so many people struggling finding their purpose in life.
Yeah, so listen, the struggle is its lack of clarity, and it's the difference that people focus on activity versus identity. So a lot of people ascribe success in life and their success as a purpose by their activity, when in reality, Dwayne, it is identity. And identity is defined and built, quite honestly, from the inside out. It's an inside job, right? But the activity, which is the outside, the external, what we see, what we can, almost, we turn on social media and we see activity all the time. And in a lot of cases, it's embellished, it's Photoshop, it's whatever it is. But we measure our success based on the activity that people say, this is your job, therefore that's your level of success. This is your bank account, therefore that's your level of success. Versus, what is it that your identity calls for? And I take people on a journey to take their identity to understand that you, I, and everybody else out there, all the listeners, they have an identity, and that's called a superpower. And if you then understand and discover your superpower, that's the discover part of Discover, Develop, Display. You discover you have a superpower, then you develop what that it is, the it factor. A little bit of a heads up, that's the next book coming out. But you then understand and develop that it, and then you display it, not only for self, but for others. That's transferring from a superpower to a super purpose power. And then the struggle becomes less. When you understand that you have it, you can develop it, and then you can display it.
I guess when I think about it, I guess that's the hard part about discovering your superpower as you've displayed it. Because you mentioned there the activity versus identity. And many of the things that you mentioned in activity are things that are external. Our jobs, our bank account, our cars, the way society views us and the way we are, or the way we feel we're perceived by society. How do you get through that messiness to really discover your superpower if it's so influenced by so many external forces?
So, I use a lot of psychometric in my practice as a coach, an author, and all. And so I use psychometric assessments. The discovery process is discovering through assessing. So you can we can do an assessment as easy as ask the 5 people who you're most closely related to are around. Ask them, interview them, do what we call a 360. That is the very simple way of doing it. And then there's other assessments, the Berkman, the DISC, the MBTI, so there's all of the psychological assessments as well. But I also say one of the things that you can understand and get through the messiness, in addition to assessing, is simply asking yourself, what is it that I'm excited about? What do I have a passion about? What is it that I lose sleep about? What makes me angry when I hear something is being done or not being done about it? That's a great, like, I just asked 5 questions. That's a self-assessment that helps bring clarity to one's identity.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is it that drives you, or motivating factors, not the external stuff, but what drives you internally? And that's just simple steps to discovering, and clearing the path to from the messiness you talked
Mm-hmm.
about.
So if I was to ask 5 of my closest friends and I wanted to discover
Mhm.
what my superpower was, what would I be asking?
So you would ask, what do I want to come to Dwayne for? And when do I go to him to get advice? When do I think of him when an issue, a problem, or a process comes up? What do I know that will really trigger him as far as getting his, going from first to fifth gear in a heartbeat? What topic? What are some of the things that, he really talks about all of the time? What are the common themes? And when you start asking the collective, you start getting common words, languages, themes. So I asked the 5 people that you're closely related to. I did the same thing for myself. And one of the big words I came up with was inspire. Randall inspires. He inspires people. I'll take you back to my daughter, who wrote, and I famously say this, it's in the book, Rise to the Role. Talk about how my daughter wrote in 6th grade. She's 25 now, but in 6th grade, she wrote a letter to her dad. And in that letter, she said, my dad is inspiring. He inspires people, and I'm really proud of him for what he does. And that was and she's 25 now, right? So for years and years and years, that was up on my wall. That was actually looking at me, trying to tell me and define my story. But I spent several years, decades, as a matter of fact, in corporate America, trying to be successful through my activity, when my identity, the whole time, it's actually still up on my wall, the framed picture, it's inspiring. And lo and behold, it hit me. That's my identity. I was doing it a little bit in the corporate world that I was working, because I worked as a CEO, executive coach, and advisor to boards. But I wasn't doing the inspiration that was creating joy. I was being successful and monetary and all of that. But I asked all of these people, that word inspire came up. And so fast forward, I developed the InSpirit, Inspire, my initials RIT is InSpirit Institute. And so there you go. So that's activating my why, activating my superpower, and moving beyond trying to please with activity to really working my identity and making it my super purpose power.
Well, and thanks for that explanation. And as I hear it, it's getting those questions out there as you're connecting with
Yeah.
people and they're giving you back common themes, common responses. For you found that common thread was inspire, and it actually dated back, as you mentioned, to your daughter way many years ago. So I guess now the question would be, how did you move from that word being just a word to actually being a function in a new career or a purpose?
I created a system of success, or an SOS. I always say, when you operate in systems and you create systems for yourself, and it eliminates the variables of life, because life be life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It does.
So the variables, the life, So the variables in life are our feelings, our emotions. A variable could be the weather, the seasons of life, right? So you have to create a system. For example, I know that you're in Toronto, right? And so the weather changes from one season to the next. So why would you wear shorts in the winter? You know that there is an operating system of that season that you have to prepare for, and so as a result of that, I created a system that regardless of what happens in the variable, I am going to operate and work in that system of success, or my SOS. And it starts every day with a daily habit tracker. I call it a daily habit tracker. And I'll give you, here is my cadence on a daily basis. I wake up, I worship, I ask why up, I wise up, I want up, I work up, and then I win up. That's my daily habit tracker.
How did you get to this point? When did you first feel the beginning of this journey for you?
Curiosity. I always tell people, be curious. And you got to be internally curious, right? Because I talked about InSpirit Institute, but I also, I take that root word. It's in your spirit. Whatever you have, I say everyone has an in spirit that creates inevitable outcomes, but it's being curious about who you are. It's being curious about asking. Again, my daily habit tracker. Part of that is the wake up, and then why. It's asking myself, what's my why, right? How do I activate the why of today? Then I wise up. So not only am I curious about what I can do, but then I'm curious about how I can, like, what is that data? What is that information? What is that? I call it, my version of AI is applied insights. What insights do I get that I can take and I can absolutely maximize for me? And the daily habit, maybe one day, maybe a week, maybe a month, you won't see anything, but it is the consistency of discipline of applying the insights or the AI, the consistency of the discipline of applying that AI in your daily habit. Maybe it won't show up in a week or two. And that's where a lot of people drop off. But if you are consistent about it, it will show. And that's where I get inevitable outcomes. It will be inevitable. And that outcome, whatever it is that you're looking for, is inevitable if you apply a system, a methodology, and you're disciplined and consistent.
Where did that curiosity start? Because I'm sure a lot of people do have maybe curious thoughts and ideas of who they are and where they want to be. But for you, Randall, what was that emotional, I guess, initiative that got you going? What were the events happening at that time?
Number 13, when I was young, I tried out for a baseball team and I didn't make it. And I was, in my opinion, and many's opinion around me, a very ordinary young man at the time. And so I tried out for the baseball team, didn't make it. Through the coaxing of my parents, from one of the church members who was one of the coaches, he said, all right, he didn't pick me, but he ended up saying, okay, we'll let him on the team. All the numbers, however, are taken except for the number 13, because again, external activity and mindset, everyone thinks the number 13 is bad luck. So I got number 13, right? And so my self-awareness was, number one, I'm starting out at a foundation of being ordinary. And so what will get me not only, on the team because my parents said so, but being a contributor on the team. And so that's where my curiosity came. And I started out, I think I would say I had the privilege of rejection very early in life. And the privilege of rejection made me really analyze and assess, I don't want to be ordinary like this. I want to get picked. What do I do so that people will notice and pick me, or so that I am able to be a contributor. Because for that first year on the baseball team, I got in like maybe one or two times and I struck out and I wasn't good. But that's where the curiosity of what can I do to change? That's where the discipline, the commitment, and the habits really, well, that and my parents. I have to attribute it to my mom and my dad. And I saw their hard work and their discipline. I was like, they're onto something. If I can apply that to the things I want, okay, now let's translate this because I'm going from my story at, when I was young to everyday life for people. If you can translate your ordinary through discipline, habits, and making a system for yourself, you will inevitably get success. And so I translated that a ordinary young baseball bench rider to I was an all-star by the time it was all said and done. And then I took that and I patterned that in life. And, I've run marathons now. I've done Tough Mudders. I've done Spartan races. I've done tries, on the physical side. But then also I've worked for Fortune 5 companies, a couple of them. I was a senior partner in corporate America. It's all taking that ordinary self and applying that habitual habit tracking system.
When you use the word ordinary, I could imagine that some people may be listening and thinking that, you know, for lack of a better understanding, that ordinary could be bad versus being extraordinary is good. So there's this black and white way of thinking of it. I'm getting from you that's not what it is. So can you define in your words, what does ordinary mean? What did it mean to you?
Ordinary means that you have a great foundation to start to do whatever it is that you want to do. You know, and so ordinary is the platform. Ordinary is taking all of what the world has given you, what God has created you to be, which is a masterpiece, and it's taking that and then taking that canvas, what we call the ordinary, that blank canvas, which is already good, and then creating your extra on top of that and defining that and creating a picture that you would be able to curate for yourself. Don't let anyone draw your own picture on the canvas of your life, is what I tell you.
You know, where do you think, in your experience, where are most people when they think about their purpose or their lives? Like, are most people relating to ordinary the way you are as that foundation kind of level, or are they looking at ordinary differently?
You know, it depends on where you are. I wrote the book Rise to the Role. And so I talk about there are opportunities to elevate wherever you are in life. There are some people that don't have the confidence because they believe that their success is measured by, again, you go back to, what job you have, what car you drive, what neighborhood you live in, your financial bank account. But your success and your elevation can be determined by your effort, right? It can be determined by, I learned some of the greatest things in life, like a catalyst for the word super purpose power. I'll tell you a real quick story. It was when I was in a checkout line at a grandmother having a conversation who was the cashier. And we were talking about, her life and how's it going? Got a couple more hours to go till my shift ends. Well, how's your day going? It's going, and she used the word. She said, yeah, just an ordinary life. And I said, really? Do you find yourself ordinary? I said, what are some of the things that you like to, again, this is me being the coach, that I am. I said, what are some of the things you do? She said, well, I'll be honest with you. My superpower is when I'm with my grandkids. I said, there you go. I said, so you do have it, but your mindset is telling you that it's all about this cashier job. I said, but the impact, and here's the thing, here's the measure. You can be extraordinary by having impact and influence over the things and the people around you. And that cashier, and I told her, I said, wow, you have a super purpose. I said, you have a super purpose power. That at that moment, that's when that word was created. And it went into the book. So she had an impact and an influence. What she believed was ordinary, if you activate it and you trigger what it is, then it can become extraordinary for anyone. So many people are walking around thinking they're ordinary. They're not. They just have to explore and be curious about their impact and influence of the things around them.
So when you talk about being extraordinary, it doesn't necessarily always have to equate just to career or financial. It could
No,
relate to just relationships.
it's as I say, it's activating the hidden treasure not seen by sight. Right? You have to make sure that that light that comes on, it's ignited through not necessarily someone externally turning the switch on, but internally having the mindset and confidence to turn it on for yourself.
In the Psychology Today report, it also said those who feel they have little or no purpose are more than twice as likely to report anxiety or depression. Do you think that the word or the experience of trying to understand your purpose is just maybe too massive and too daunting for most people?
Yeah. So I was doing, because again, I do, in my coaching practice, I do assessments for executives. And by the way, there are so many CEOs, and I've coached some of the major CEOs out there. They're real. They're human, and certainly they have some things that they're rock stars in public. But I will tell you, when they get a assessment of their team and the comments back, and I'm not a clinical psychologist. I did study that in undergrad, but I'm not a clinical psychologist. But I will tell you, a lot of the anxiety and stress comes from hearing the naked truth about how you come off with others. And that perception can bring some anxiety. But here's what I tell people: control the controllables. That's a cliche and that's a phrase, but it is true. You need to be able to control what you can. I think a lot of anxiety comes from people thinking that they can impact and influence some of the things that are not in control of themselves. That's the first thing. I said, secondly, when you go in to diagnose, a surgeon actually creates more pain and trauma by helping, because a surgeon actually cuts. That's why you need anesthesia, because the pain factor, it actually increases exponentially in order to fix the issue. And again, we're going back to the psychology of anxiety and depression. Sometimes people have to understand, you don't run away from it, but go to it. And there may be moments, much like a surgeon, where you have to get the diagnosis. And in order to heal, sometimes it hurts more in the moment before the accelerated healing comes to
This
be.
sounds like it's the discovery part of your framework. And I can imagine as you're going through that discovery and you bring up things like
Mhm.
facing yourself, maybe through the eyes of other people, how does one stay
Yes.
motivated to continue through that trajectory? Because I can imagine it must be very difficult for people to see that maybe the perception they've had of themselves is not what other people see.
Yeah. The possibilities of your ability. And that's going from discovery. And that's why you can't just stay in one phase of the plan, of the method. You gotta, when you discover, you gotta then go to develop. And in developing, you have to see the possibilities of your ability. And in doing that, so I'll give you an example. I used to be a fitness trainer, and so I trained someone to run a marathon, and they'd never run more than a couple miles. And me myself, my first marathon, I had never run more than a couple of miles. And so the possibilities of your ability is to take milestone moments and celebrate in those milestone moments. And it's not the event, because I just heard from, I forget her name. She was the first American woman to scale Mount Everest. I was just last week. She was talking about her story. And so the beauty is in the process, because the first time that she and the team back in, I believe it was in 2002, they made it up to, and it took a month, and they made it to maybe 200 feet of the apex of Everest, and they had to turn around. That was it. Was she a failure? Was the team a failure? It was the process of development. She did, and they did what no one else in America, American women, did at that time. But society says, well, you didn't make it to the top. The top is only a moment, but the month process is what made that successful. Fast forward, she ended up in 2012 going all the way up. And then when she was all the way up, and this is the story for people, she was up there for a few minutes, and then she came back. Her success, as it relates to our definition of success, is reaching the very tip top. The reality is she was only up there for a few minutes. The success in her preparation, her story, her development, all of those things, that is the success. And so I tell people, when you get to that apex, when you get the medal, when you get the trophy, when you get to run that marathon, which eventually, going back to that story, we trained, and I was like, enjoy these moments, because the marathon is going to come and go. But the moments of development, that's the lasting thing. Those are the stories.
With such a focus in society on outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about getting a wage increase, or when you think about getting a promotion at work, those are outcome
Mm-hmm.
oriented. You believe you've done the
Yes.
work, but really the outcome is what's going to put a stamp on your efforts. So because we have such a hypervigilance on the outcome, how, what's the challenge for people? Like, what do you perceive are some of the risks that people are facing right now, enjoying the development, when in fact the rewards typically come from the outcomes?
So I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And I actually, in Rise to the Role in the book, I did a chronology of Jalen Hurts' ascension to being the Super Bowl MVP. And so part of doing the research and the study was just looking at, what was the ultimate outcome and the apex of his career. And so it's still being defined, right? Because he's still an active player and a quarterback. And for those that are listening, Jalen Hurts is the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles American football team. And so they won the Super Bowl now 2 years ago. So that being said, one of his teammates, A.J. Brown, who is a receiver, who is, at least at the time that we're talking, is still with the Philadelphia Eagles, although many will say he may not be with them longer. They interviewed him after the Super Bowl win, and he was one of the stars of the Philadelphia Eagles. And here I'm getting to the point about all outcomes. He said, yeah, the Super Bowl was the victory, but I don't feel that I'm satisfied. And so he went right back to work and training and honing in on his craft. And here's the reason why. Because when people see an outcome as the finish, they start the process of failure. The outcome is not the finish. The outcome is a period in a space in time where then after that, you have to go back. And it's almost like, I've heard this, it's almost like if you get on a treadmill, I'm using all of these fitness analogies. I had to come up with some other ones, but if you get on a treadmill and you run at the top speed and you get to your outcome of your top speed, are you going to be able to sustain that top speed forever? No. It's a process. You get to where you got to go, but then, so after you display, and that's what I call the display portion of the outcome, you then have to defend your process and defend to determine that next step. And so it's all about outcome, understanding the outcome is the apex, and then where do you go from there? Because just like Mount Everest, you're only going to be up there maybe for a few minutes, or you'll die, quite honestly. Like the treadmill, you're only going to be running at top speed for so long because you can't maintain it. So outcome is not the end.
I'm glad you used the Jalen Hurts example when you talk about outcomes and the work that he puts in,
Mhm.
obviously, to achieve the greatness that he has. So, for many people who don't know, Jalen Hurts is the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. He's gone to 2 Super Bowls. And in both Super Bowls, he's faced off against Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, who's, pretty largely renowned as the best quarterback in the NFL right now. And he had to face him twice.
Yes.
In both Super Bowls, those would argue that he outplayed Patrick Mahomes, and he actually lost the first one, but then he won the second one. However, if you watch sports news relations around Philadelphia Eagles and around Jalen Hurts, there's a lot of discussion about Jalen Hurts in terms of where he sits in the hierarchy of great quarterbacks. And there's still some people, even though he has the Super Bowl MVP, he's outdueled Patrick Mahomes twice, he's won a Super Bowl, he's reached that highest level of success. There's still people questioning his position, still questioning his worth and his value. So, and I say that to relate it to everyday people, where the outcomes specifically speak to how we feel we're being perceived, regardless of what we've achieved or what we're doing behind the scenes. People are still going to look and expect these certain outcomes. So when you're developing, if your intention is to develop to be able to have an outcome that is worthwhile, that matches your purpose, how does somebody really enjoy the journey of development, knowing that really you're trying to culminate to that outcome that you want other people to see? Because I still see that being a huge friction point for a lot of people in really engaging in the development from a sense of wanting that day-to-day work ethic, knowing that it's keeping them consistent. Like you said, they're doing that marathon versus that sprint 100% of the time.
Yeah. So number one, thank you so much for the summary. I mean, you could have wrote that section in Rise to the Roll. That's pretty. So still go out and buy the book, but that's essentially what the purpose of doing that piece on him is. And so here's the thing. A lot of people think that everyday little thing, and again, I go back to the daily habit tracker, right? That's doing the little mundane things repeatedly, making the ordinary, mundane, daily habits the ordinary, so that the cumulative effect is it's extraordinary. So often we wait and we just want to live in the extraordinary. But no, the daily habits are moments. And so this is the big thing. This is one of the big takeaways that I have in the book. I say moments in life, there are moments to be enjoyed. And so I this is my challenge to everyone. See the moment, honor the moment, and then master the moment. And if you do those three things, that creates like that beauty of the mundane and the ordinary. And that's what another formula to getting it from ordinary to extraordinary. You see the moment, you honor the moment, and then you master that moment.
With the people that you've worked with in helping discover their purpose, what have you found to be the biggest common challenge that these individuals have had?
That the enemy is their own mind. The mind is the battleground. The mind is the place where the workshop, where the potter's clay takes place. And and I say that in a way such that it's their minds tell them that I need to focus on, because I have pillars, right, that I ask people to really put and emphasize. And there are so many professionals. So let's talk about professionals. And in a professional sense, if you are able to, in the pillar of field or your job, your career, your field, right? If you are successful at that, then everything else should follow. Well, that's not the case. That is a pillar in life, right? And then, so what I've developed is there are five other pillars in addition to field. There's family. There's field, that's one. There's family. There's fun. There's finances. There's fitness. And there's faith. And by faith, we're talking about your values and your principles. But so where are you as it relates to that? And so I take people through I take them through a rating system, a discovery. And so we develop and display all of those. What's your level of satisfaction as it relates to, I don't know, fun? Well, I find that many professionals with fun, what about family? Well, I'm busy. I'm working on the job and the career. Okay, if your level of satisfaction in your career is at a 85 and your family is at a 40, what are you going to do about that? What will they say about you as far as your legacy? What are the moments that you can see, honor, and master and apply those to your family? So you see, that's where kind of all of this systematic stuff is starting to come in, and the insights from the response of, wow, you know what? I didn't realize I'm only giving 40% to my family and 80% to the field. So that's where you apply the insight.
When you say that their mind is their battlefield, it's the challenges that they are projecting within them. Are you saying that they're prioritizing potentially the wrong things and they may not be aware of it?
Well, it's up to them to determine whether they're right or wrong. But what I do try to offer is I offer, again, insights, perspectives, and insights and experiences, and saying to them, your mind is telling you that you're a pretty successful person. So why are you coming to me and working with me? There's something that's there that is in the back of your, rattling around, that's saying things aren't quite aligned. And yeah, because the perception is, and I get a lot of folks that come to me that say, I am successful at fill in the blank. And so here's the mind thing that, you talk about. I say, okay, let's define success for me. And so their definition of success is through a definition that is very monolithic. It's like one-sided. It's blinders on. I said, okay, let's expand the definition of success. Let me bring your mind and take you out to a broader perspective. Think more broadly when you're thinking about what it is that you want to get. And so that's why, it's taking your mind and taking it from, because typically very successful people are laser focused at the thing. But if we take their mind and expand that out just a little bit, then that's where the mind expansion comes into play. And what I call it is a cognitive reshaping. And so that's where the neuroscience that, I study, that's where that comes into play.
You mentioned the people that hire you are typically successful people. So in their minds, if they're successful, why are they reaching out to you?
Because I always say there's a difference between being happy and having joy. And many people are happy with the things that are around them, but they don't have internal joy. And so, full disclosure, I'm a pastor. So I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a pastor, I'm, an athlete. And so that's where I get, to try to do that psychoanalysis as far as and that's why I brought in faith as a part of the pillar. And I don't necessarily use it in terms of the religious practice. I use that word in terms of that's the pillar of are you satisfying those values that are there for you? And is that joy coming from the external, or is it coming from the value system that is there or not there? And let's explore that. So yeah, so that's what the reason they come to me is they're happy with what they're performing, but their identity, and again, that's the activity identity, but they don't have joy in what they're being.
When somebody is discovering their purpose, what are they looking to discover? Because sometimes you think about purpose as being this clean, clear description of who you are and what you're meant to be. Is it that easy, or is it more ambiguous and it's just a general direction that you are discovering?
It can be as easy, like I said, as it was, and it is framed up on my wall for over 15 years. And it can be as, as obvious as the nose on your face, so they say. And so when they're coming and they say, I'm not quite sure what it is, but they're doing it. They just haven't put it into a framework that they can be intentional about it. They're doing it, but like again, if I go back and ask your closest five friends, they will tell you probably some of the things that are obvious. And then once it becomes obvious that that is the thing that you could and should be doing, like your curiosity, your genuine need and want to make sure that you advance people through this podcast. If then you become intentional about it, wow, that is the awakening that awaits many people when they come to me, or the Institute, I should say, because it's a whole bunch of others that, are in the practice.
You know, when I think about your pillars of family, fun, finance, fitness, and faith, it seems like you're ranking each of those out of 100. How does one determine where each of those ranks? Like, what would I be looking for as a criteria to say this is a 20 compared to this being a 50 compared to this being an 80? What goes behind those numbers?
Yeah. So, and again, that's the way I assess in my system. And I independently take each of those pillars and say, rank each one from 0 to 100. So it's not a cumulative. That's the first part of it. I say, what is your satisfaction in each particular pillar? Right. And then we take that and we say, okay, let's bring them all together. And where are you as far as how you prioritize? Now we bring them all together. How you prioritize all of them in your life. And oh, by the way, what else is out there? Right. That, because I'm certainly, I tried to do all the F's, but there may be some other F's or G's or H's that are out there that could fit into it as well.
And and when somebody is thinking, like for myself, if I think about fitness, for instance, and I work out
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pretty consistent, would I,
Mm-hmm.
based on what I'm working out, let's say 5 days a week, would I put an 80
Yeah.
I would rank that an 80 out of 100 at that point, or would I say it's 100 out of 100?
So you can say, as a former fitness trainer, and I don't do that anymore, but I would get so frustrated when people would come and say, I'm coming to work out, and they would talk to you, of that 55-minute session, they would want to have a conversation and dilly-dally for 45 of those 55 minutes, right? So if you tell me, hey, Randall, I'm working out 5 days. Well, what are you doing? What is the impact of each one of? And I'm just using that as the example because I use it with all of them. What is the impact? What is it that you're doing that creates an impact for self and or others that makes that number, out of 100? That makes, if you say it's an 80 because you're showing up 5 days a week, that's when I get curious. Why? What are you doing? How are you doing it? What's your level of intensity? Do you have fear going into it? Or are you comfortable? Some people show up and they do the comfortable things in life. If you're doing the comfortable things in life, you're not growing. You're not growing. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. And just the word behind that I'll use again. Muscles grow when they're put in a tear down mode to build up. There you go.
What's the criteria you use for family? Is it about how much time I spend with them, the quality of time I spend with them?
It's the what, how, the who, the when, and the why. And so it's the what are you doing? Who is it that you're doing it with? Define family. And so we get a definition of what family. There have so many definitions of what family is. So, what are you doing? Who are you doing it with? Why are you doing it? Is it a check the box? I have a 25 and 28 year old daughter, and so, we could be at dinner. I could be with them, and we're all like, on the phone,
Oh,
right? So you have to kind of dig into the criterion in terms of family. Why is it we're doing it? I often, when I come to thinking about myself and my girls, my wife, I've been married 30 years plus, it'll be 31. Um, I think of what will be my impact when I'm not here. Statistically, men die before women. So I'm likely going to die before them. And so what are the deposits that I want to leave with them? So that's one of the big criteria when you talk about family. The purpose of the family it's a seed that's planted so that it itself can be nourished. So I can create that environment, that good soil, number one, for my seeds. And I consider my wife and my girls that I can create the best environment. I can water and nourish that environment so that when I'm not here, they grow.
it's you reminded me there of situations that really annoy me when I go to restaurants and I see families that are sitting at a table and the kids are on their iPads and the parents are on their phones. It just boggles my mind that you've taken yourselves out to go out for a nice dinner and you're all
You go.
somewhere else essentially. When you're on social media, you're not present, you're somewhere else in the world. That always boggles my
Yeah.
mind. But it could relate to the next part, which is fun. Like, what's the criteria that establishes fun?
So, what is it that you're doing? What activities? And it could be something as simple like we have my wife and I are not empty nesters because we have what we call our baby. He's Nico. He's a little white fluffy Bichon dog. And I cringe sometimes calling him a dog but walking Nico. It's probably going to be one of my next books. Walking Nico is fun because and by the way, you can like bleed into these killers because it's not only, the physical activity, it's not only family time for my wife and I, but it's fun for me because it gets me outdoors. It creates innovation for me, times where I can innovate. And so I define fun as something where, I love learning. And so creating environments where I can learn, and this is just my description of fun, is fun. And so some people, one of the obvious, vacation. You probably maybe like me. I like, going out and going for a run. That's fun. A lot of people are like, it's not fun for me, but it allows for me anything that allows for your mind and your head to have a space to be in a relaxed mode, both your body and your mind and your being, I define as fun.
Has there ever been a time, and this is just out of my curiosity, has there ever been a time somebody has described their fun that kind of made you do a double take?
Yeah, I mean, some people, their description of fun is, I mean, it varies. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No,
I guess I'm wondering how vulnerable people need to be during these sessions and these
I,
realizations.
Well, I always tell people I'm a vault. I mean, because again, the pastoral side or the counselor or the coach or the advisor, I always tell people, I'm a vault. So I'm the keeper of many secrets. Even when I do it professionally with employers, I tell the sponsor employer, we're having these sessions with your employee. Confidential means confidential. I will tell you there is a progression, but confidential is confident. So what happens not only in Vegas, but in our conversations, stays in our
Stays in the
conversations,
vault. What ab-
stays in the vault.
what about finance?
So this is the interesting thing because people ascribe finance to a dollar value. My definition of finance is what gives you freedom, what position gives you freedom, and that could be a financial position to be able to do the things that you want to do when you want to do them. And that's financial freedom. It's there's this gentleman Dave Ramsey, and he has a system called financial freedom. And there are many other systems that are out there. It's called financial freedom. But when I talk about finance, I'm talking about, are you doing the things that put you in a position so that you can do whatever it is that you want to do without feeling that pressure and the force of having to do it? And I always say, don't wait till retirement. So me personally, I'm never going to retire. I don't like that word actually, retire, because I've seen statistically too many people that actually stop doing things, and that's my a lot of people's definition. Oh, I'm not going to do anything. But when you stop doing anything, you stop living, and you start dying. And there have been statistics. My father-in-law, he retired within 2 years, was dead. My dad, who has advanced dementia, he stopped doing the physical activities that he was so good at doing, and that dementia kicked in and accelerated exponentially. So finance is a freedom that allows you at any age before retirement to do those things that make you happy.
Hmm. I love that. It's all about experiences. I love that. What about
Yeah.
faith? And I can imagine this one is could be provocative in some situations, I could imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and me as a pastor, an active pastor, and been ordained, and I've done everything from cradle to burial in my activities. I like the marriage part though. That that's always helpful. But when I talk about faith, I talk about the principles and the financial foundations of your values. And so what I say is, what is it that you believe? And so I work with people of all religions, all of them, right? And so and so we have an opportunity in this portion of it to say, what are your beliefs and values that help drive your value system? That there are non-negotiables, because you have to have those type of good boundaries to be able to be effective and respected. And so what are those values? And do you live those values? Do you show those values? Are your values activated in the things that you do, how you lead individuals? You have to have that, because a valueless leader, let's say, if I'm coaching an executive, a valueless leader is someone that does not have a good foundation to lead.
I really like this because as you went through family, fun, finance, fitness, and faith, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation when you said that people aren't finding their purpose because they're living in activity versus identity. And when you
Yes.
go through those five F's, each of those five F's involve a certain level of activity, meaning you're participating in something. However, when you really do the deep work, and I know we just kind of brushed over it, you start to
Yeah.
uncover your identity because as I'm going through it with you, I'm thinking about myself in each of these areas and it starts to really define and color in those spaces or those gaps that I may not really put a lot of thought into. And it starts to really uncover my purpose. And I guess that's the point.
It is. It is. And it's the uncovering the hidden treasure that's not seen by the light is what I call it. And doing the deep work really does uncover or and surface that for me.
And is this something that would help people who are busy being active and moving in a direction really to understand that maybe the direction that the activity that they're doing is good, but the direction may not be aligned with their purpose?
Yeah, I always say there's a difference between activity and being effective, right? So activity is you can say an activity is a dog chasing its tail. They can be active and you can be chasing it around it, around it, around. Uh, but if you are directional and effective, then that's very different than just being busy. Oh, I'm so busy. What does that mean? When people, oh, I'm so busy.
Mm.
I can't do this. I can't do that work. I can't, go work. I'm busy. But then we break. What does that mean? Are you effective? Are you moving forward with what you're saying you're
I
doing?
like that. It's like driving a vehicle. You're doing something, you're working, you're moving forward, but you may be going in the wrong direction and may end up in a place where you don't want to be or doesn't amplify who you are. Um, that was really, really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything, Randall, today that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about?
Well, Dwayne, I love your curiosity, and I think most of what and I always say I like to be in the moment, see the moment, honor the moment, master the moment, right? So, I think that was very thorough in terms of how you asked me to kind of pull out the foundational F's or the pillars, the discover, develop, display, the definition of super purpose power, and how people can rise to their own role in life, however they want to define that rising. So I think we covered quite a bit, my friend.
If you were, if one of our viewers, one of our listeners was to say to you, Randall, what is one thing you could tell me that can get me moving in the right direction to uncovering my purpose? What would you say to them?
I say master the moment, and that uncovers life's mysteries. And when you master the moment to uncover life's mysteries, that's be inspired, be insightful, be inspired. Number one, just look for things that inspire that spark or ignite the light that's in you. And then after you do that, that inspiration will ignite the light, and then that will help you to advance to those things that are right there for you. It's just ready to be lit. And so that will uncover life's mysteries because a lot of times, a lot of us live in the mysteries of life and trying to uncover it. But look, the light will lead the way.
This is my favorite part of the conversation where I let the guests go through their letter to their former self, what they would say to
I mean,
younger version of themselves, knowing everything they know now. Floor is yours.
right. So here's the thing. And this is part of what I believe in. And I may have even said it in some form or fashion. It's when the world sees you, they see your light manifested, but don't let the world be defining of who you are and what you are, because you are far greater than the world can tell you. And you have to see yourself not as the world seeks you or sees you, but remember that you have that superpower that's in you. And that way you can go from ordinary to extraordinary, and you can create any type of outcome that you want in your life. All you have to do is do the hard work until those hard habits are easier. The hard work will never get easy, but the hard work habits will make the hard things easier. That's what I would tell myself, to get into that cadence and stay in.
That's amazing. Randall, thank you so much for the conversation today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity, Dwayne, and thank you so much for inviting me on.